going to be in Hebrews today. We're going to be in Hebrews 12, 1 through 13. Actually, we're going to be in quite a few different places. Dear Heavenly Father, I pray that you bless the reading of your word, the studying of your word, the sharing of your word, and your word in our lives, Father, that we can be living the word that you have given us. We know that Jesus Christ is the word, the living water. We ask, Father, that you let this living water be in us through your word. Jesus' name is holy name. Amen. I've got a question for you. It's a question I've had to ask myself. It's a question I'll probably have to ask myself again, more than once. My question is, what's stopping you from fully serving God? There's something. If you're not fully serving God right now, there's something stopping it. What's hindering you from fully loving your neighbor? Not liking them, not tolerating them, not putting up with them, but loving your neighbor. What's stopping you? Well, we learned a couple of words. And the words are, in Hebrews 12, let us. And we're going to look at those two words. Let us. It's kind of tough when you look at two words and try to build a sermon around them. But you know, God give us so much material in the Bible for our edification and our use and for to bless us, that he gave us those two words that have been translated in the English language to let us. Athletes, they train. They seek a prize. I was working on this sermon Wednesday afternoon. The World Series had not been played yet. I did not know the outcome of it when I was writing these notes. The last time the Cubs had won was 1908. That was a long time ago. Long time. The other team had only won in 1948. That was the year I was born, so that was 68 years ago. That's a long time. But you know one thing about those two teams that I thought about as I was writing this? They worked and they practiced relentlessly for 68 years and 108 years. They had one goal in mind. Let us win the World Series. That was their goal. That was what they worked for 108 years, for 68 years. And they worked at it. They practiced, went through many people. But that was their goal. And it was denied them. It was denied them. Till Wednesday night. Well, you and I are striving for an even greater goal. We're not trying to win a World Series. That means nothing compared to what we're trying to win. We're trying to win salvation. Well, Brother Bob, what do you mean by winning salvation? Exactly what I said. 1 Corinthians 9, 23 through 25. I do all this to make the good news known. I do it so that I can share in the blessings of the good news. You know that in a race all the runners run, but only one runner gets the prize. So run like that. Run to win. All who compete in the games use strict training. They do this so that they can win the prize, one that doesn't last. But our prize is one that will last forever. In Philippians 3, 13 through 15. Brothers and sisters, I know that I still have a long way to go, but there is one thing I do. I forget what is in the past and try as hard as I can to reach the goal before me. I keep running hard towards the finish line to get the prize that is mine, because God has called me through Jesus Christ to a life up there in heaven. All of us who have grown to be spiritually mature should think this way too. And if there is any of this that you don't agree with, God will make it clear to you. Wow. Are we willing to do at least what those athletes did for 108 years and 68 years? And that's work daily to win a temporary prize. Next year, unless the Cubs repeat, there will be somebody else winning the World Series. Their prize will be gone. Oh, they can look back and say, I did this. But we're told by the Scriptures, forget the past. You know, you've had failures in the past. I certainly have. You've had successes in the past. I certainly have. None of that matters. What matters is what I do for God in the future, starting now. The Olympics was going on back then, so the writer of Hebrew, which is unknown, they've attributed it to several different people, but we don't have a definitive answer who wrote Hebrews. They understood this comparison to the sports. They used a lot of the analogy to it. And it had some of Paul's characteristics, but it also had some characteristics in writing of other people. So there's no definitive word on that. But our goal is more important than the precious gold that we sang about, than the silver. Our recognition is more than worldly recognition. 2 people are running to be president of the United States. That's the highest elected office in this world. I would challenge you that it's higher than any other president in any nation in the world. They're running for that. It means nothing compared to the recognition that you'll get when you're told, well done, good and faithful servant. That is so much more recognition than anything this world can offer. But yet, what do people do to get that earthly recognition? Why do we not work just as hard for God's recognition? It's more important than anything we can do here. The Bible teaches us that we must examine and have discipline in our lives. If we're going to follow Christ, it has to be a disciplined life. We cannot follow Christ in an undisciplined life. Salvation is not just a momentary experience of going to the altar. In my case, when I was 8 years old, saying a prayer and going on about my life. Was I saved that day? Yeah. But was that the end of my salvation? I needed discipline. I needed to examine my life. I needed to bring my life into line with what God would have my life be. So do you. We have to earn that by working for it. Not that we have to earn salvation by works, but we have to work because of our salvation. People get that one kind of confused sometimes. They think they can earn salvation. You can't. It's a grace. It's a gift. They think that you don't have to work when you get salvation. Wrong again. Work and salvation are tied together. They're just not dependent upon the one. We can't work for it because we can't earn it. We can never be good enough, work hard enough to earn salvation. Only Christ can provide that. But if we're not doing any works for God, we might want to reconsider what our relationship is with God. It says in Hebrews 12, 1 through 3, therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of faith. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured such opposition from sinners, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. Wow. A great cloud of witnesses. You know, for a long time in my youthful life, I thought people were watching me pretty closely. I got grandma there keeping an eye on me, and I got other people watching me, witnesses to see when I messed up. Because then when I'd feel guilty about it, I figured it was because I was messing up in front of them, you know. You know, if you ever go out to start doing some sin and you think of your grandmother, that's not a bad thing, because it just makes you stop. But that's not what they're talking about with witnesses. They're talking about examples. These witnesses are witnesses that we are watching. These great cloud of witnesses are people that we're watching. Yes, I'm watching Grandma, but I'm watching her faithful witness in living. I'm watching the people that have went before me, the saints in the Bible, the saints in my family, the people that I've known. I look at their witness, That's that great bit of witness. It really means they're examples for us. That's what these witnesses are. They're not spectators just kind of keeping an eye on us. And we're surrounded by them. Old Testament, New Testament, in our lives, in our families. We're surrounded by these witnesses or examples of faithful living. So I was walking down the hall in the parsonage this morning. There's a big picture of my mama. And I generally have a little talk to her. Actually, I kind of listen because she's normally the one talking to me. But I was there talking to her for just a moment, and I was thinking back about her faithful witness through the years, how her Bible was filled with notes. Preacher could not preach a sermon that my mother didn't check out to see what he said. She wasn't going to take no chance on somebody lying to her about nothing. And for many years, the preacher was her son-in-law. Now, I'm almost sure if she'd have lived long enough to have been a faithful member of wherever I preached, she'd be checking me closely. That's what we do. We have witnesses. We have people like that we can look at. We have examples. What's this throw off? What do we want to throw off he's talking about? Well, we want to throw off anything that would hinder us. What hinders us? That's different for each of us, but there are things that hinder each of us. Is it work? Possibly. Is it passions? Could be. Is it laziness? Possibly. There are things that hinder us from serving God fully. We need to throw those off. No serious Christian, no Christian trying to serve God can carry around a lot of extra baggage and try to serve God. Can't do it. Can't bring baggage from your past where you failed. Can't bring baggage that you're currently having and doing. And you can't bring the baggage that you're trying to get in the future. What you need to do is serve God. You've got to have self-discipline. It's our responsibility to have self-discipline because anything else hinders us. It talks about entanglements, the sins that so easily entangle us. This is the sin that we commit when we do not have self-discipline. If you are not self-disciplined, if you are not looking at your life, examining your life, if you're not looking at what you're doing, you will get entangled in sins. I had a thing on, I don't know if you've seen it or not, but one of the little thing I like to play before church, and it says discernment is not knowing right from wrong. Discernment is knowing what is right from almost right. Sometimes we get it almost right. Well, unlike horseshoes, almost right does not count. We either get it right, and that's God's way, or we get it wrong. But sometimes we want it to get it almost right. Well, I'm pretty close. Yeah, my faith is not as good as it could be, but it's not bad. It's not nearly as bad as Morris's over there. You know old Morris, don't you? Whew, I'm much better off than that. Well, there you go. That sin does what? Entangles us. It strikes us quickly. There's never been a world champion of anything that did not have discipline, self-examination, and determination. Nobody ever won a championship without it. The Christian life doesn't just happen. It's not something that happens to us. I've asked people about their salvation sometimes. I'll say, talking about church and whatnot, well, I happen to be a Christian. No, you didn't happen to be a Christian. You either are a Christian, you either chose to be a Christian because God chose you, you responded, but no, you didn't just happen to be a Christian. But yet people will tell you that. It tells me that they probably don't have the self-discipline in their life that they need. Too many times we sit around waiting for something spiritually wonderful to happen to our life. I'm just waiting for God to bless me. Yeah, well, good luck with that cupcake, you know. The runner in a race doesn't say, I'm just waiting for that finish line to get here. They're running for it. They're striving for it. Using the same analogies as they used in Hebrews, you have to go, work, seek, pray. You can't sit back and wait. Heard a great message to the football team Friday from the associate pastor over at Emmanuel. Great, it was in Psalms. You're going to hear a whole sermon on it one day, because I loved his thoughts, I loved what he did, and when I write that sermon, I'll give him credit for it. But it was moving. That's what we have to do. Seek. We also have to have focus. Let us fix our eyes upon Jesus, because Jesus is where our focus has to be. Another thing with running, runners have a single-minded focus. I told you before, I used to be a competitive shooter. And when I shoot competitively, I would zone. And when I would zone, there was only a couple things in the world to me. That was my front sight, my trigger, and the target area. And target area being the least important. I had to focus on the trigger and the sight. The target would take care of itself if I did these basics right. Well, Christianity is the same way. We have to focus on the basics, God's Word, the discipline, our obedience. We have to focus on what's important. The end results will take care of themselves. We don't have to worry about it. God chooses some people to be evangelists and to preach to millions. Then he takes most of us and puts us right here where we can preach to some. Because that's what he does. God is a personal God. God is not an impersonal God. God knows every hair on your head. And he wants us to know and care about each other just that much. To love God first and foremost, love our neighbors as ourselves. Sometimes Christians quit. They just stop. They stop this church, they stop that church, they stop a ministry. Because sometimes their feelings get hurt. They feel like they're not appreciated. Somebody says something. Somebody doesn't give them recognition. Many reasons. There probably are good reasons to quit a church. If you're in a church that is not preaching the gospel of Jesus Christ out of the Bible, you need to either fire the preacher or quit the church. It's the only two options I can see. But if you're somewhere working for God, serving God, honoring God, and there's somebody else there that's just a little bit of a thorn in your side, you can pray to God about it, but he didn't take it away from Paul, and he may not take it away from you. Just keep on working through it. People are our examples, but they absolutely cannot be our focus. They are something that is the result of what we do. Our focus has to be on Jesus Christ. How do we focus on Jesus Christ? Through his Word. How do we focus on his Word? By studying his Word. By coming to Sunday school. I learn a lot in Sunday school. I learn a lot in Bible study. I learn a lot when I'm reading the Bible. I learn a lot when I talk to people. I constantly learn. If you're not constantly seeking out and learning, then you're not doing what you should do. You're not having the self-discipline. You're not having the focus on Jesus Christ. You're just living in this world hoping everything will be okay. Jesus is the perfect example. He followed the course, and he followed it with joy, even though he suffered more than any human being has ever suffered or ever will suffer again. But he suffered in joy. Father, your will, not mine. Didn't say he did it without knowing what he was doing. He counted that cost. But when he said to God, Father, your will, not mine. Blood was coming from him. He was dripping blood. Now, I've been concerned about a few things in life. But for me to bleed blood, you normally got to cut me. He was pouring the blood out of his body because of that. I can't imagine the emotional stress. Because all the weight of the sin of the whole world, past, present, and future, was being put upon him, who knew no sin. There's times in your life, and I stole this from Bob from a couple of weeks ago, you're going to have gray days. I like gray days. You'll probably hear that again. We do have gray days. They're not the deepest, darkest depression days. They're not the things when things are really horrible, but they're not the days when we're on top of the mountain. They're kind of just gray days. How you doing? I'm here. What's going on? Nothing. How you feel? Fine. How many of you have answered like that? Me. Well, that's a gray day. Sometimes it's tough to live in this world with everything that's going on and keep a cheerful, happy, joyful countenance. It's tough, but it's what we're to do. Runners run with torn ligaments. They run with broken bones sometimes. They run with many things that would stop us. But I got to thinking about pain, and I'm kind of a fan of pain. Pain does a couple of things for me. Motivates me for one. Give me enough pain, I'm going to move and do something. Or if I have enough pain and I'm not sure if I'm alive or dead, the pain tells me I'm still here, because the dead don't feel pain. Oh, you're laughing. I woke up, thankfully, that I had pain on a couple of occasions. Yeah, I'm still here. Ow! But I'm here. Well, if we quit every time we hurt, if we quit every time we have pain, this could be physical pain, emotional pain, this could be social pain, this could be whatever pain. If we quit every time we have pain, we will not finish anything. If Arthur's doing some work and his wrench slips, which probably does a lot, he smacks his knuckles and says, I ain't doing this no more. You wouldn't have plumbing. I want plumbing. Arthur worked through the pain. Well, you know what I also want? I want Christians. I want you to work through the pain. I want you to bring the gospel of Jesus Christ to others. I want to do that. I want to work through the pain. Sometimes we have to think about the people that went through what Jesus Christ went through. What Paul had this horrible, we don't know what it was, but an issue. He had a horrible, he prayed to God to take it away. This is Paul. God said, no, my grace is sufficient for you. Sometimes you got to live with the pain. In Hebrews 12, 4 through 10, in your struggle against sin, you have not yet resisted to the point of shedding your blood. And you have completely forgotten this word of encouragement that addresses you as a father addresses his son. It says, my son, do not make light of the Lord's discipline and do not lose heart when he rebukes you. Because the Lord disciplines the ones he loves, and he chastens everyone he accepts as his son. Endure hardship as discipline. God is treating you as his children, for what children are not disciplined by their father? If you are not disciplined, and everyone undergoes discipline, then you are not legitimate, not true sons and daughters at all. Moreover, we have all had human fathers who disciplined us, and we respected them for it. How much more should we submit to the Father of spirit and life? They disciplined us for a little while as they thought best, but God disciplined us for our own good, in order that we may share in his holiness. Wow, that's a bunch. We talked about discipline again this morning too. And not to pick on Arthur, because Diane did a good job of that in Sunday school, but Arthur recounted that he took a lot of punishment for his sisters. And he took it stoically. But he says he remembers every lick of it. Well, Jesus Christ took our punishment. Took it stoically. And I know that he remembers every lick of it. By his stripes we are healed. He gave everything for us. When we fail to have self-discipline, and we're a Christian, we're called, God will discipline us. If you're not disciplined, if you're not being disciplined, it's a couple things. One, you're doing everything just perfectly right, which I'm kind of doubtful of, or you're not a child of God. Take your choice. If you're getting discipline in your life, it's a good thing. It's kind of like the pain. Discipline from God in my life reassures me that I'm his. says about the father giving you discipline. My mama was the disciplinarian in our family. I knew she loved me every time she would make me go get a switch and wear me out. Now, of course, I know that at 68 years of age. At 12, I wasn't real sure about that love. Sometimes it's that way with God. When we're going through the discipline, we wonder why. We even lash out to God. God, why? 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 Well, if you'd quit asking so many questions and start looking at the book and look at yourself, you'd understand why. You're not doing what you need to be doing. God disciplines us. Coaches teach and learn more from failure than they do successes. So do we. When God brings discipline into our life, it's never for retribution. He's not punishing us. It's always redemptive. Any discipline that God sends in your life is redemptive to move you towards a goal, towards a purpose. The point of discipline has to be, and always is, love. Because when someone's disciplined by God, it just reaffirms God loves us too much to let us continue to sin. Same way with our children. We discipline them for the same reasons. We don't want them to continue. It's not good, it's not safe, it's not healthy. It's hard to see this when you're being disciplined. It really is. But the fruit of the discipline shows up later. It's just like when you focus on the trigger and the sights, the fruit of your actions show up with a good target. Well, the fruit of your life shows up later. It says, Hebrews 12:11, no discipline seems pleasant at the time, but painful. Later on, however, it produces a harvest of righteousness and peace for those who have been trained by it. That makes us fruitful. We're to be fruitful. The whole purpose of this discipline is pruning sin from our lives. Sin that stops the fruit from producing. God's discipline is redemptive, but you know, it hurts him more than it did us. Because this discipline included sending his son to accept our punishment. We couldn't have bore up under the true justice that we deserved. Jesus Christ had to pay that price. If there was any other way in the universe for us to have salvation, I believe God would have looked at it. He sent Jesus Christ because that is the only way. Jesus Christ tells us he's the only way. So when people start talking about many paths to God, they're being deceived. There is but one. That's Jesus Christ. In John, I'm not going to read it all, but John 15:4-6 said, where the branches, he is the vine. And it's painful, but he has to prune. He has to prune the branches on the vine. Hebrews 12:12-13. Therefore, strengthen your feeble arms and weak knees. Make level paths for your feet, so that the lame may not be disabled, but rather healed. We're talking about feeble here. We're back to this training thing again. Athletes cannot be feeble. They cannot have weak arms, weak legs. I watched a couple of football games yesterday, and the least hit that I saw would have killed me and put me in the hospital. You know? And yet, if they were weak and not trained, they couldn't do this. We have to deal with the weak areas in our life. If we don't strengthen up these weak areas, we're going to stumble, we're going to fall. Here's the bad part. I can stumble and I can fall. But you know, it causes others to fall too. Now, I can be forgiven from God. I can re-examine my life, and I can stand back up. How about that person that fell because of you? Are you sure they're going to stand back up? We are to be an example for society. We have witnessed many politicians, some evangelists, and even local preachers that fail, they sin, they stumble. You know them, I know them. It does not have to be. It's our responsibility. It's not just something we should do, it's our responsibility as a Christian to run well, not to stumble. Verse 13, the final verse clinches the thought about this example. We're to make level paths for our feet to go so the lame may not be disabled, but rather healed. There's level paths. We're not to put obstacles there. We're not to have hurdles there, encumbrance there. We're not to have things that we're dragging along. It's supposed to be smooth. We don't want anything there that we're going to stumble over or cause someone else to stumble over. We have to live a life that is glorifying God. The word lame here, they're not talking about physical. They're talking about those who waver back and forth, who are uncertain, uncommitted. In other words, they're undisciplined in their life. We bear this responsibility to God and to our friends and our neighbors. If we follow the crowd, we do not follow it to God's glory. 2 Timothy 4, 7 and 8. I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. Now there is in store for me the crown of righteousness. We're all racing for something. Every last one of us is racing for something. Could be a promotion, could be a marriage, it could be a family, it could be, you're racing for something. You should be racing for God. God will add all the things unto you that you need if you will just serve Him. If you'll make God the focus. That's the point. The Bible. Focus on God's Word. All the rest of these things will fall into place. You don't have to race for them. God will give them to you. Dear Heavenly Father, I pray that this message be blessed, the reading of your Word be blessed. And Father, let us examine our lives. Let us have self-discipline. Let us pursue your glory. Let us serve you. Let us love one another. Father, let us, in whatever need that you see in our lives that we need to do. I pray that in Jesus' name, his holy and mighty name. Amen.